Welcome to Marple Whispers. I'm Sean. Tell me, where are you listening from right now and what time is it there? I'd love to know. Share it in the comments, along with how you liked the story. I reply to every single one of you. Now let's step into the mystery. In the glittering canals of Amsterdam, amid blooming tulips and festive lights, a lavish party turns deadly. A wealthy importer, Karel van der Linden, plunges into the dark waters, poisoned and bludgeoned. Was it his elegant wife, hiding a lover's secret? The nervous doctor with access to deadly drugs? His artistic niece, entangled in family fortunes? Or the sly antique dealer peddling smuggled diamonds hidden in rare bulbs? Enter Miss Jane Marple, the unassuming English sleuth with a razor-sharp mind. Invited for a holiday, she uncovers a web of greed, betrayal, and forged alibis. But the killer? Her own dear friend, driven by desperate debts and a fatal impulse. Twists lurk in every shadow, forged letters, tampered brakes, a crushed tulip petal that seals the fate. Will Miss Marple expose the truth before another falls? Dive into death beneath the lights of Amsterdam, a chilling Miss Marple mystery where no one is innocent and every light hides a darker secret. Stay hooked. The revelations await. Chapter 1. The Invitation from Afar. In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, where the hedgerows bloomed with the first flush of spring and the church bells tolled with predictable serenity, Miss Jane Marple sat in her sun-dappled parlour, her fingers deftly manoeuvring knitting needles through a skein of soft grey wool. The pattern was intricate, a cable stitch that required concentration. But her mind wandered, as it often did, to the peculiarities of human behaviour. The postman had delivered an unexpected letter that morning, its envelope bearing a foreign stamp and an elegant looping script that spoke of continental sophistication. She slit it open with a silver letter knife, a relic from her school days, and unfolded the creamy paper. The words danced before her eyes. My dearest Jane, it has been far too long since we shared a pot of tea and dissected the follies of our acquaintances. You simply must join me in Amsterdam for the Tulip Festival. The canals are a riot of colour, and the air hums with life. Yet, I must confess, a subtle shadow hangs over our little expatriate circle here. Whispers of discord, perhaps even danger, that I dare not commit fully to paper. Your keen eye for such matters would be a balm. Do come, Helena Voss. Miss Marple leaned back in her chintz armchair, her blue eyes sharpening behind her spectacles. Lady Helena Voss, née Cartwright, had been a spirited debutante in their youth, marrying into Dutch wealth with all the flair of a romance novel. Now residing in a stately canal house, she hinted at intrigue amid the blooms. It reminded Miss Marple of old Mrs. Bantry's garden party scandal, where a misplaced brooch had unravelled a web of jealousy and theft. People, she mused, carried their secrets like hidden thorns, no matter the setting. Amsterdam, with its labyrinthine waterways and gilded facades, promised a fresh tableau for observation. The decision came swiftly. She rang for her maid, Dolly, and instructed her to pack the essentials. Sturdy walking shoes for cobbled streets, a warm shawl against the North Sea chill, and her favourite detective novels for the journey. Though real life, she knew, often outpaced fiction in cleverness. The train from London to the Hook of Holland was uneventful, save for a chatty fellow passenger who boasted of tulip fortunes, planting seeds of curiosity in her mind. Crossing the channel by Forey, she watched the waves churn, pondering how even the most placid surfaces concealed depths. Upon docking, a swift connection brought her to Amsterdam's central station, where the clamour of bicycles and trams assaulted her senses like a symphony gone awry. Lady Helena awaited on the platform, her fur-trimmed coat and pearl earrings a testament to prosperous exile. "Jane, darling, you haven't aged a day," she exclaimed, embracing her with genuine warmth, though Miss Marple noted the faint lines of strain around her eyes, lines that spoke of sleepless nights. The chauffeur, a taciturn man named Hendrik, whisked them into a gleaming black Mercedes, gliding along the bustling avenues toward the Herengracht. As bridges arched gracefully over mirror-like canals, Helena leaned close. "I'm so relieved you're here. It's my husband's partner, Karl van der Linden, a bluff, ambitious sort who's built an empire in imports. Lately, he's been on edge. Anonymous threats arriving by post, murmurs of funds vanishing into thin air. And his wife, Elise, insists on throwing this lavish soirée tonight at their villa by the Amstel. She claims it's to celebrate the festival, but I suspect it's a facade to sniff out enemies." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to a flower seller hawking vibrant tulips from a cart. "How intriguing! In my experience, such gatherings often reveal more than they conceal. Tell me about the guests. People are like puzzle pieces. Their edges give them away." Helena obliged eagerly. "Karl himself, of course, loud, generous, but with a temper like a sudden squall. Elise, his Parisian-born wife, all elegance and sharp wit, though her smiles don't quite reach her eyes. Then there's Peter Brandt, an antique dealer with fingers in too many pies. He's been seen lurking in shadowy auctions. Sophie Moreau, Karl's niece, a budding artist fresh from the Sorbonne, sketching everything in sight. And Dr. Elias Thorne, the family physician, nervous fellow, always twitching but devoted to Elise's headaches." The car pulled up to the villa, a sprawling edifice of red brick and gabled roofs, its windows aglow against the fading afternoon light. Music spilled from within, a jaunty waltz mingling with laughter. As they stepped inside, the air thickened with the scent of hothouse flowers and cigar smoke. Miss Marple was introduced as an old English friend with a knack for stories, and she settled into a plush armchair by the fireplace, her knitting resumed as a perfect camouflage. From her vantage, she observed the swirl of guests. Karl van der Linden, broad-shouldered and ruddy-faced, clapping backs with forced jollity while his eyes darted suspiciously. Elise, gliding like a swan in a gown of midnight silk, her diamond necklace catching the chandelier's sparkle. Brandt, sleek as a fox, examining an antique vase with appraising fingers that lingered too long. Sophie, perched on a window seat, her pencil flying over a pad, capturing furtive glances. Dr. Thorne, hovering near Elise, his hand trembling as he adjusted his spectacles. An undercurrent hummed beneath the gaiety. Karl's abrupt hush when Brandt approached. Elise's fleeting frown at Sophie's sketchbook. Thorne's whispered aside that drew a sharp retort. Miss Marple smiled faintly to herself. It was all so familiar, like the vicarage teas back home, where polite chatter masked brewing storms. As the evening deepened and lanterns flickered to life along the river terrace, she sensed the first ripples of something darker, waiting to surface beneath Amsterdam's enchanting lights. Chapter 2. Shadows on the Canal. As the clock in the Van der Linden villa chimed midnight, the party reached its crescendo, a whirlwind of clinking glasses and murmured flirtations that echoed off the high ceilings. The terrace doors stood wide open to the balmy spring night, inviting guests to mingle under strings of paper lanterns that swayed gently in the breeze off the Amstel River. Miss Marple, ever the observer, had excused herself from the throng with a polite murmur about needing fresh air. She slipped through the French doors, her sensible shoes patting softly on the mosaic tiles, and made her way down the stone steps to the water's edge. The canal gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting the golden glow of the bridge lights arching overhead. A picturesque scene that belied the tensions she had sensed all evening. She paused near the boathouse, a sturdy wooden structure housing the family's sleek motor yacht, its hull bobbing idly against the dock. The air carried the faint scent of river mud and distant rain, mingled with the exotic perfume of the tulip beds lining the embankment. Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to a similar evening in St. Mary Mead, where a garden fete had concealed a pilfered heirloom, only revealed by a misplaced footprint. Here the stakes seemed higher, the shadows longer. She leaned on the railing, peering into the dark water, when a sharp cry rent the night, high and startled, like a bird startled from its nest, followed by a resounding splash that sent ripples racing across the surface. "Help! Over here!" The voice was Sophie's, the young artist, her tone laced with panic. Guests poured out onto the terrace in a flurry of silken tuxedos, lanterns snatched up to cast erratic beams. Miss Marple hurried back, her heart quickening not from fear, but from the instinctive thrill of unfolding drama. Karel van der Linden lay face down in the shallows, his burly form half submerged, dinner jacket trailing like a drowned flag. A gash marred his temple, dark blood seeping into the water, turning it an ominous crimson under the lights. Elise was the first to reach him, her scream piercing as she collapsed to her knees on the dock, skirts pooling around her. "Karel! No, this can't be!" Dr. Thorne pushed through, his face ashen, kneeling to check for a pulse with trembling hands. "He's gone, quite gone, the blow, and the water." Peter Brandt hovered at the edge, his sly features twisted in what might have been shock or calculation. Sophie clutched her sketchbook to her chest, tears carving tracks down her cheeks, while the other guests milled about, a chorus of gasps and whispers. Inspector Gerrit van Dyke arrived within the quarter hour, his squad car screeching to a halt, with sirens wailing briefly before silence fell. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with a moustache that bristled like wire and eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Out of the way, ladies and gentlemen," he commanded in accented English, his voice booming over the lapping waves. "This is a crime scene now." Floodlights were erected, bathing the dock in harsh white, and divers were summoned to retrieve the body. As Karel was hoisted onto a stretcher covered in a tarpaulin, Miss Marple noted the details with clinical detachment. The railing bent outward, as if from a forceful shove, a smear of blood on the wooden post, still tacky, and curiously, a single crushed tulip petal nearby, its vivid red hue stark against the grey planks, petals scattered like confetti from a macabre celebration. Van Dyke turned to the group, notebook in hand. "Who saw what? Speak up. Accidents don't happen with such convenient witnesses." He began with Elise, who dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her voice quavering, "I was inside, dancing with the doctor. Karel said he was stepping out for a smoke. I never imagined," Thorne corroborated, fidgeting with his cufflinks. "Yes, we were in the salon. Waltz, I believe. Sophie was sketching by the window. She might have seen more." The young woman shook her head vigorously. "I heard voices arguing, angry, low tones from the boathouse. But the terrace was crowded. I couldn't make out words. Then the cry. I ran out and saw him in the water." Brandt shrugged, his tone oily. "I was sampling the cognac with a few fellows. Carl owed me a favour or two, business matters, but nothing to do with this. Bad luck, that's all." Lady Helena, standing beside Miss Marple, whispered urgently, "Jane, I caught snippets earlier. Carl snapping at someone by the boathouse. Raised voices, like thunder before a storm." The inspector eyed them all suspiciously, jotting notes, but the alibis overlapped in the chaos of the party. No one could be pinned definitively. "You'll all stay in Amsterdam," he declared. "No travel until I say. For now, go home, but expect calls tomorrow." As the guests dispersed, the villa's glamour shattered. Miss Marple lingered a moment, her gaze fixed on the evidence markers fluttering in the breeze. "Curious, isn't it?" she murmured to Helena as they climbed into the waiting car. "A fall from a low railing, yet the wound suggests intent. And that petal, not from the garden beds, I fancy. Something deliberate there." Helena shivered. "You're too calm, Jane. This is murder, plain as day." But Miss Marple only smiled faintly. "Calm is the ally of clarity, my dear. Panic clouds the view." The drive back to the Herengracht was sombre, the city's lights now casting elongated shadows that danced mockingly on the canal walls. Amsterdam, once a fairy tale backdrop, felt laced with menace, the bridges like silent sentinels guarding secrets. At Helena's elegant townhouse, with its polished floors and crystal decanters, the two women shared a late-night tisane in the drawing-room. Dolly would have approved of the chamomile, Miss Marple thought, though it did little to soothe her racing mind. "Tell me more about Carol's enemies," she prompted gently. "Those threats you mentioned, did he confide in you?" Helena poured another cup, her hands steadier now. "Not directly, but my husband let slip that Carol suspected embezzlement in the firm. Van der Linden Imports deals in diamonds and curios, high stakes. Peter Brandt's name came up more than once. Shady dealings with black market antiques, they say. And Elise, well, marriages in such circles are often stormy. Carol doted on Sophie, funding her whims, which irked his wife no end." Miss Marple nodded, knitting forgotten on her lap. It echoed the village feuds she knew so well, money and affection twisting into knots of resentment. Upstairs in the guest chamber, with its four-poster bed and canal view, sleep eluded her. Moonlight filtered through lace curtains, illuminating the water below where barges glided silently. She replayed the scene. The cry, Sophie's or another's. The blood, fresh enough for recent struggle. Poison? No, too soon for that suspicion, but the inspector's grim face hinted at complications. "People don't tumble into canals without reason," she whispered to the darkness. "It's like that business with the curate's bicycle. Seemed an accident until the chain links told otherwise. Greed, perhaps? Or a lover's quarrel?" Amsterdam's canals, she realized, were veins pulsing with hidden motives, and Carol's death was but the first clot. As dawn crept in, tinting the sky pink, Miss Marple resolved to probe further. The Tulip Festival continued unabated outside, floats parading with oblivious cheer. But beneath the lights shadows stirred. She would watch, as always, for the telltale slip, the glance too long, the alibi too pat. In the game of detection, patience was the sharpest weapon, and she intended to wield it with precision. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Coffee House. The morning sun pierced the lace curtains of Lady Helena's guest room, casting intricate patterns on the polished oak floor that reminded Miss Marple of the veined leaves in her St. Mary Mead garden. She had risen early, as was her habit, to savour a quiet cup of tea while the household stirred. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, like scenes from a well-thumbed mystery novel. The splash, the bloodied temple, the petal that seemed out of place. Details, she murmured to herself, are the breadcrumbs leading to the truth. Dressing in her tweed skirt and cardigan, she descended to find Helena already at the breakfast table, her face drawn and pale against the crisp white linen. "Jane, I scarcely slept a wink," Helena confessed over poached eggs and toast. "That inspector telephoned at dawn. Autopsy pending, but he's convinced it's foul play. What do we do now?" Miss Marple spread marmalade with deliberate care. "We observe, my dear. People grieve in telling ways. Why not a stroll through the Jordan? Fresh air clears the cobwebs, and cafes there might yield loose tongues." Helena agreed readily, perhaps relieved to escape the oppressive silence of the house. The Jordan district unfolded like a living postcard, its narrow streets lined with gabled houses, leaning conspiratorially toward one another, bicycles chained to wrought iron railings, and window boxes overflowing with geraniums. They settled at a corner coffee house, its terrace overlooking a humpbacked bridge where houseboats bobbed lazily. The aroma of strong Dutch coffee mingled with the sweet stickiness of Stroop waffles, those caramel-filled wafers that Miss Marple found delightfully indulgent. As a waitress in a starched apron served them, Miss Marple steered the conversation deftly. "Now, Helena, paint me the full picture of Carol's world. Van der Linden imports, diamonds from Antwerp, antiques from estate sales, yes, but whispers of trouble?" Helena glanced around, lowering her voice as if the potted plants might eavesdrop. "It's the diamonds, Jane. Carol partnered with my husband years ago, but lately shipments vanished, poof, like mist over the canals. He accused Peter Brandt of diverting them through back channels. Brandt's shop is a front, they say, for fencing heirlooms with dubious provenance. And Elise? Oh, she's a firecracker. Parisian by birth, married Carol for his fortune, but her extravagances strained the coffers. Jewels, gowns, even a racehorse stabled in the countryside." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Ah, the eternal dance of want and wealth. Reminds me of young Mrs. Edge in the village. Spent her inheritance on fripperies, only to discover forgery in the family silver." Their chat was interrupted by a familiar figure cycling past. Sophie Moreau, her artist's satchel slung across her shoulder. Helena waved her over, and the girl joined them, her auburn curls dishevelled, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "Aunt Elise is prostrate with grief," Sophie said, accepting a coffee with trembling hands. "The house feels haunted." Miss Marple leaned forward sympathetically. "You were close to your uncle, weren't you? Funding your studies at the Sorbonne. Generous indeed." Sophie nodded, fiddling with a sugar packet. "He believed in my talent, but Aunt Elise saw it as squandering. Last week I overheard them quarrelling. Something about prescriptions from Dr. Thorne. She takes sedatives for nerves, but Uncle Carol shouted that Thorne was too familiar, lingering after house calls." Miss Marple filed that away, recalling a St. Mary Mead doctor whose familiarity had masked an affair. "And your sketches, dear? You were drawing last night. Did any capture the terrace before the tragedy?" Sophie's cheeks flushed. "A few quick studies. Faces in the crowd, the lanterns glow. Nothing useful, I fear." But her hesitation spoke volumes. Miss Marple sensed evasion, like a villager dodging questions about a missing pie. Bidding Sophie farewell, they wandered toward her nearby studio, a converted attic in a leaning warehouse, its windows offering panoramic views of the district's rooftops. Canvases leaned against walls, depicting twilight canals with ethereal light, boats slicing through fog. One unfinished piece caught Miss Marple's eye. A male figure in profile, brow furrowed, resembling Carl in a moment of ire. "Inspired by life?" she inquired mildly. Sophie busied herself with brushes. "Uncle, yes, from a recent visit." He was tense, muttering about betrayal. Pressed gently, Sophie admitted Brant visited often, haggling over vases and clocks. Uncle called him a thief in velvet gloves. Leaving the studio, Miss Marple suggested a detour to the Rijksmuseum. Its grand halls a treasure trove of Dutch masters. The tulip exhibit drew crowds, panels recounting the infamous mania of 1637, when bulbs fetched fortunes before the bubble burst. "Symbols of fleeting wealth," Miss Marple observed, studying a display of rare Semper Augustus specimens, petals streaked like marble. Helena nodded. Carol collected hybrids, genetically tweaked for uniqueness. He joked they were his retirement fund. As they admired a vermeil vase from the Golden Age, voices drifted from an adjacent gallery. Peter Brant, in heated negotiation with a curator, his tone wheedling, "This piece is authentic, straight from a Haarlem estate." Karel van der Linden vouched for it himself. The curator demurred, citing irregularities. Miss Marple edged closer, concealed by a pedestal. Brant's parting shot. "With Carol gone, perhaps the paperwork will surface. Accidents clarify matters." The words hung like smoke, fueling Miss Marple's suspicions. "Bold, isn't he?" she whispered to Helena as they exited into the bustling museum plin. Pigeons cooed around them, tourists snapping photos of the iconic Amsterdam sign. A sudden call on Helena's portable telephone shattered the idyll. Inspector Van Dyke, his voice gruff. "Autopsy complete, mevrouw. Blow to the head, yes, but traces of poison in the bloodstream. Digitalis, slow acting. Someone insured death twice over. Where were you all last evening?" Helena relayed the news, her face blanching. "Poison? But who?" They hurried back to the coffee house for respite. The same terrace, now bathed in afternoon light. Miss Marple pondered aloud. "Digitalis, from foxglove, common in gardens. Overdose mimics heart failure. Dr. Thorne prescribes it, you said," Helena confirmed. "For Carol's arrhythmia. But Elise handles the medicines, insists on it." A pattern emerged. Brant's shady deals, Thorne's proximity, Elise's resentments, Sophie's secrets. "Like threads in a tapestry," Miss Marple mused, sipping her cooling coffee. "Pull one, and the design unravels." As shadows lengthened, a street musician struck up a melancholy accordion tune nearby, evoking the canal's hidden depths. Miss Marple spotted a newsboy hawking papers, headlines blaring, "Mysterious Death at Amstel Villa, Tycoon's Fall, or Foul Play." She purchased one, scanning the article for clues. It mentioned anonymous tips to the police, hinting at business rivals. "Publicity stirs the pot," she said. Helena fretted. "What if the killer strikes again?" But Miss Marple remained serene. "Fear is their weapon. Knowledge is ours. Tomorrow we visit Brant's shop. Antiques often hide more than dust." The day waned with the sun dipping behind the gables, casting long fingers across the water. Amsterdam's charm persisted, but Miss Marple saw beyond the facade. The coffee-house whispers, the museum murmurs, the studio silences, all pieces in a puzzle of motive and opportunity. As they returned home, a chill wind rose, rustling leaves like conspiratorial sighs. The game was afoot, and she, the unassuming spinster, held the key to unlocking it. Chapter 4. The Antique Dealer's Secret. The morning mist clung to Amsterdam's canals like a veil, softening the edges of the gabled houses along the 9 streets. as Miss Marple and Lady Helena stepped from their chauffeured car. The air carried a tang of damp stone and blooming hyacinths, a reminder of the Tulip Festival's relentless cheer. Despite the tragedy that had darkened the city's glitter, Miss Marple, wrapped in her sensible tweed coat, carried a parasol not for rain but for the comfort of habit, its tip tapping the cobblestones as they approached Peter Brandt's antique shop. The storefront was a study in calculated charm. Leaded glass windows displayed porcelain figurines and tarnished silver candelabra, while a discreet sign proclaimed Brandt's curios, treasures of time. To Miss Marple, it recalled the cluttered shop of a St. Mary Mead pawnbroker, whose antiques masked pilfered goods. Appearances, she murmured to Helena, are the first lie we believe. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish, shelves groaning under Delft plates and ormolu clocks. Brandt emerged from a curtained back room, his thin frame clad in a velvet jacket, his smile as polished as the brass around him. "Lady Voss and Miss Marple, is it? A pleasure. Come to browse, or is this about poor Carol?" His tone was smooth, but his eyes flicked nervously, like a fox scenting hounds. Miss Marple smiled benignly, settling into a creaking chair offered by a shop assistant. "A bit of both, Mr. Brandt. Your reputation for rarities precedes you, and Carol spoke highly of your eye for authenticity. I'm told he was a collector, of tulips no less." Brandt's fingers toyed with a gold pocket watch, its chain glinting. Oh, Carol had a passion for those modern hybrids, engineered bulbs, rare as a Rembrandt sketch, costly too. He paid off a debt to me only yesterday, in cash, mind you. His words were too quick, Miss Marple noted, like a rehearsed line delivered off cue. She glanced at a nearby desk, where a leather-bound ledger lay open, its pages marked with cryptic initials, KVDL scrawled repeatedly, some entries scratched out in haste. "Business must thrive on such prompt payments," she said mildly, "though I imagine disputes arise. Over authenticity, perhaps?" Brandt's smile tightened. "Carl and I had our spats. Market's cutthroat, but nothing serious. He was alive and roaring last I saw him." As he spoke, Miss Marple's gaze fell on a crystal vase in the corner, holding a single red tulip with petals streaked white, an echo of the crushed petal by the boathouse. "What a striking flower," she remarked. "From your own stock, or a gift?" Brandt shrugged, too casually. "A supplier's sample. Tulips are everywhere now, aren't they?" But his hand twitched, betraying unease. Leaving the shop, Miss Marple whispered to Helena, "He's hiding something. Those ledger marks scream of debts unpaid or secrets buried." Helena nodded, her face pale. Carol accused him of fencing stolen goods through the firm. Could Brandt have... Miss Marple's lips pursed. "Possibly, but greed alone doesn't kill so neatly. We need more threads to weave this web." That afternoon, they lunched at Helena's canal house, where a maid served smoked eel and rye bread. The telephone rang mid-meal. Inspector Van Dyke, his voice clipped. "Miss Marple, your friend Lady Voss mentioned your knack for noticing things. Autopsy confirms digitalis poisoning alongside the blow. Likely administered hours before death. Wine or food? Any thoughts?" Miss Marple, cradling the receiver, replied, "Patience, Inspector. Motives are like canal currents, hidden but traceable. Have you searched the yacht?" A grunt then. "Not yet. Why?" She smiled. "Just a hunch. Boats hide secrets better than houses." The call prompted a visit to Dr. Elias Thorne, who had agreed to meet them at his modest practice near the Westerkirk. The doctor's office was clinical, yet cluttered, with medical journals stacked haphazardly and a faint smell of antiseptic. Thorn himself was a wiry man, his spectacles slipping down his nose, a nervous tic jerking his cheek as he greeted them. "Terrible business, Carol's death," he said, offering weak tea in chipped cups. "I treated his heart condition. Digitalis carefully dosed. But an overdose? Unthinkable." Miss Marple sipped her tea, noting his tremor. "And Mrs. van der Linden? She relies on you for sedatives, I hear. Easy to mix up vials in a busy household, perhaps?" Thorn's tic intensified. "Elise is delicate. Nerves, migraines. I keep strict records. But yes, she manages the medicine cabinet. Carol was careless with his doses sometimes." His words faltered, as if catching on a snag. Miss Marple's eyes softened, disarming. "A doctor's burden is heavy, knowing so much about a family's frailties. Were you close to the van der Lindens?" Thorn flushed. "Professionally, yes. Elise confided in me." Carol's temper strained her. A clue, Miss Marple thought, like the village chemist who confided too freely with a lonely widow. As they left, a bicycle courier delivered an anonymous note to Helena's doorstep, its scrawl bold. "The lights hide the truth. Look to the yacht." Miss Marple tucked it into her handbag, her mind racing. "Someone wants us to dig or to misstep," she said. Helena paled. "Jane, this feels dangerous." But Miss Marple's expression was serene. "Danger is a spotlight. It reveals as much as it blinds." With Hendrik's help, they reached the van der Linden villa by dusk, the Amstel River now a ribbon of silver under the setting sun. The yacht, moored at the boathouse, gleamed with fresh polish, its deck empty save for coiled ropes. Inspector Van Dyke, summoned by Miss Marple's call, arrived with a constable. "Your hunch better be good," he muttered, climbing aboard. Miss Marple pointed to a panel beneath the helm, its edges slightly misaligned. The constable pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment, empty but dusted with a faint sparkle. "Diamond dust," Van Dyke confirmed, scraping a sample. "Smuggling, perhaps? Carol's business wasn't all tulips." Miss Marple nodded, her mind weaving connections. Brandt's ledger, Thorn's prescriptions, the tulip petals twin in the shop. "Smuggling diamonds in hollowed bulbs," she mused aloud. "Clever, but risky. Carol must have stumbled on it, or been part of it." Helena gasped. "My husband never mentioned such things." But Miss Marple's gaze was distant. "People keep secrets from those they love most. Like old Mrs. Finch, who hid her son's gambling debts until the bailiffs came." As they drove back, the city's lights flickered on, turning canals into molten gold. The anonymous note gnawed at Miss Marple's thoughts. Who sent it, and why? A trap or a nudge toward truth? The festival's revelry pulsed in the distance, floats parading under cheering crowds, but the villa's shadow lingered. Brandt's evasions, Thorn's nerves, Elisa's unseen grief. Each was a piece in a mosaic of deceit. "Tomorrow," Miss Marple told Helena, "we'll visit Sophie again. Her sketches may hold more than she admits." The night closed in, the canal's ripples whispering secrets only a patient mind could unravel. Chapter 5. Entangled Alliances. The Tulip Festival pulsed through Amsterdam, its streets awash with colour as floats draped in scarlet and gold blooms glided past cheering crowds. Yet, beneath the gaiety, a chill hung over the city for Miss Marple, who sensed the tightening knot of intrigue surrounding Carol van der Linden's death. The morning found her and Lady Helena breakfasting in the airy conservatory of the Herengracht house, sunlight streaming through tall windows onto a table set with fine bone china. Over kippers and toast, Miss Marple's thoughts churned. Diamond dust on a yacht, a tulip petal in a shop, a doctor's trembling hands. "Human hearts," she said aloud, buttering her toast, "are like canals. calm on the surface, but treacherous below. We must see Sophie again, Helena. Her sketches may hold truths she's too frightened to voice. Helena, her eyes shadowed from a restless night, agreed. She's at her studio, no doubt painting to forget. But Jane, that note about the yacht, someone knows you're prying. Miss Marple's smile was serene. Let them watch. Fear makes people careless, and carelessness reveals. They set out for the Jordan, the city's pulse quickening with festival fervour, vendors hawking bulbs, children waving paper windmills, and accordions lilting from canal bridges. The studio, tucked above a bakery, smelled of yeast and turpentine, its skylight framing a sky as blue as Delft porcelain. Sophie greeted them, her smock splattered with ochre, her expression wary. Canvases leaned against walls, capturing Amsterdam's moody beauty. Gables against storm clouds, barges slicing through dawn mist. Miss Marple's gaze settled on a sketch pinned to an easel. The villa's terrace, lanterns aglow, it has figures blurred but suggestive. You were busy that night, she remarked gently. This captures the mood before tragedy struck. Did you see anything odd, dear? Someone slipping away, perhaps? Sophie's fingers twisted a paintbrush, her voice low. I was sketching by the window, yes. Aunt Elise left the salon briefly, toward the boathouse. Then Dr. Thorne followed, looking agitated. I thought, maybe a private word, but it felt wrong. Miss Marple's eyes softened, disarming. Lovers' quarrels often masquerade as other things. Did they return together? Sophie shook her head. Elise came back alone, adjusting her gloves. Thorne appeared later, flustered. A pause, then a whisper. I heard Uncle Carol's voice earlier, arguing, something about cutting losses. I didn't dare look. Miss Marple nodded, her mind slotting pieces into place. A lover's tryst, or a plot hatching? She recalled a St. Mary Mead scandal, where a vicar's wife and a choir master had private words that ended in blackmail. Leaving Sophie to her brushes, they strolled to a nearby cafe, its terrace buzzing with festival goers. Over bitter espresso, Helena fretted, Elise and Thorne, could they have conspired? But why? Miss Marple sipped thoughtfully. Motive is a slippery fish. Elise's extravagance, Thorne's devotion, both could twist into desperation. But that note about the yacht suggests a deeper game. Her words were cut short by a commotion across the canal, a bicycle courier skidding to a halt, delivering a telegram to a man in a Trilby hat. The man glanced their way, then vanished into the crowd. Curious, Miss Marple murmured. Amsterdam's eyes are everywhere. That afternoon, Inspector Van Dyke summoned them to the police station, a stern brick building near Dam Square. His office was cluttered with maps and coffee cups, his moustache twitching with irritation. We've arrested Peter Brandt, he announced. Found a bloodied oar in his shop's storeroom. Matches the wound on Van der Linden's head. Care to explain why you were sniffing around his place? Miss Marple folded her hands primly. Merely admiring antiques, Inspector. But an oar seems too convenient, don't you think? Like a poorly darned sock, it shows the stitches. Van Dyke grunted, unconvinced. He's denying it, of course. Claims the oar was planted. Any insights, Miss Marple? She tilted her head. Consider the timing. Poison in Carol's system, then a blow. Someone wanted certainty. Brandt's greedy, but is he clumsy? I'd look closer at those nearest the victim. Van Dyke scribbled a note, his skepticism palpable. I'll search the yacht again. That diamond dust bothers me. Determined to test Elise's composure, Miss Marple suggested a visit to the Van der Linden villa. They found Elise in the drawing-room, reclining on a chaise longue and morning silk, her beauty undimmed by grief. A decanter of sherry sat, untouched, her hands clutching a crumpled letter. "Miss Marple, Helena," she said, her voice brittle. "This is torture. Carol was my world, despite our quarrels." Miss Marple's tone was gentle. "Quarrels leave scars, Mrs. van der Linden. Sophie mentioned tension over her allowance. Did Carol's generosity strain you?" Elise's eyes flashed. "He spoiled her, yes, but worse, he betrayed me. Letters, hidden in his desk, proved he was entangled with her, his own niece." She produced the letters, their ink stark against creamy paper, detailing illicit rendezvous. Miss Marple examined them, noting the crisp edges, the scent of fresh ink. "Recent compositions," she said softly. "Forgeries, I'd wager, like the time our village postmistress faked a love note to trap a rival." Elise bristled, but her fingers trembled. "Impossible! I found them myself." Yet doubt flickered in her gaze, a crack in her polished facade. As they left, the city's evening lights began to twinkle, casting reflections like scattered coins on the canals. Back at Helena's, disaster struck. Hendrik, the chauffeur, reported the car's brakes had failed on a test drive, narrowly avoiding a plunge into the Prinsengracht. "Sabotage," he muttered, showing Miss Marple the severed brake line. Helena clutched her arm. "Jane, someone wants us stopped." But Miss Marple's calm was unshaken. "Desperation breeds mistakes. This is no accident. It's a warning." Over a late supper of pea soup and crusty bread, Miss Marple pieced together the strands. Sophie's sighting of Elise and Thorn, the forged letters, Brandt's convenient oar, the tampered brakes. "A web of alliances," she told Helena. "But who's the spider?" Elise might scheme for freedom, Thorn for love, Brandt for profit. Yet the yacht's secret feels central. Diamonds hidden in bulbs, perhaps, tying Carol's empire to his death. She recalled a village jeweller who smuggled gems in hollowed hymnals, caught only when a hymn page fluttered loose. As midnight tolled, Miss Marple sat by her window, watching barges glide silently past. The festival's din had faded, leaving only the lapping water and her racing thoughts. The anonymous note, the diamond dust, the tulip petal, they pointed to a mind both cunning and reckless. "Someone is orchestrating," she whispered, "but their tune is faltering." Tomorrow, she resolved, would bring sharper questions. To Elise's motives, Thorn's loyalty, Sophie's silences. The canal's shadows held answers, and Miss Marple, with her quiet tenacity, would draw them into the light. Chapter 6. Revelations by the Bridge. The Amsterdam sky was a tapestry of bruised clouds as Miss Marple and Lady Helena sat in the drawing-room of the Herengracht house, the morning's festival clamour a distant hum. The weight of Carol van der Linden's murder pressed heavily. Each clue, a forged letter, a tampered brake line, a bloodied oar, knitting together in Miss Marple's mind like a complex pattern. She sipped her tea, the porcelain cup warm against her fingers, and announced, "We must gather them all, Helena. A memorial at the villa tonight. Grief loosens tongues, and I sense we're close to unravelling this tangle." Helena's eyes widened. "All of them? Even Brandt, after his arrest?" Miss Marple nodded. "Especially Brandt. The police may hold him, but their net is too coarse. The truth lies in subtler threads." By late afternoon, arrangements were made. The Van der Linden villa, its chandeliers dimmed in mourning, stood ready to host the uneasy assembly. Inspector Van Dyck agreed to the gathering, his scepticism tempered by curiosity at Miss Marple's reputation. Whispered to him by Helena's husband. "One evening," he growled, escorting a handcuffed Brandt to the villa. but no theatrics." Miss Marple smiled demurely. "Merely closure, Inspector. People reveal themselves when they think they're safe." The drawing-room was a sombre stage. Elise van der Linden, pale in black crepe, sat rigid on a velvet sofa. Dr. Elias Thorne fidgeted near a decanter, his tic more pronounced. Sophie Moreau clutched her sketchbook like a shield, her eyes red-rimmed. Peter Brandt, released on bail, lounged with false ease, his velvet jacket incongruous against the mood, and Helena, nervous but composed, stood by Miss Marple's side. Guests from the fatal night milled about, their murmurs blending with the soft patter of rain on the terrace windows. A portrait of Carol loomed above the fireplace, his painted gaze stern, as if judging the living. Miss Marple rose, her grey shawl slipping slightly, and addressed the room with quiet authority. "We're here to honour Carol van der Linden, but also to seek truth. Murder, like a poorly stitched seam, unravels under scrutiny. Let us reconstruct that night." She paced slowly, her voice gentle yet piercing. Carol discovered a scheme. Diamonds smuggled in hollowed tulip bulbs, a modern twist on old greed. His import business was the perfect cover, wasn't it, Mr. Brandt? Brandt's smirk faltered. "Preposterous. I dealt in antiques, not flowers." But Miss Marple pressed on, her eyes flicking to the inspector. "The ledger in your shop, marked KVDL, showed debts and deals. Carol wanted out, didn't he? Threatened to expose you?" Brandt's fingers tightened on his chair. "Business disputes, nothing more. That ore was planted. I'm no killer." She turned to Dr. Thorne, whose spectacles glinted nervously. "And you, Doctor, supplied digitalis for Carol's heart." "An overdose was found in his blood, administered hours before the blow. A tragic error, or deliberate?" Thorne stammered. I prescribed carefully. Elise handled his doses. She insisted." Elise's head snapped up, her voice sharp. "How dare you? I loved Carol despite his flaws. Those letters proved his betrayal with Sophie." Miss Marple shook her head. "Forgeries, dear. The ink was fresh, the paper uncreased. Someone wanted you blamed." Sophie gasped, her sketchbook slipping. "I never. Uncle Carol was kind, not that." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "You tried to warn him, didn't you? You heard voices by the boathouse, saw Elise and Thorne slip away. You followed, fearing for him." Sophie's tears spilled. "I reached the dock. He was arguing, shouting about cleaning house. I grabbed his arm, but someone struck from behind. I screamed, and he fell." The room stilled, rain drumming louder. Inspector Van Dyke leaned forward, his moustache twitching. Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. 2 acts of murder, poison to weaken, a blow to finish. But the petal by the boathouse, matching one in Brandt's shop, was too neat. A distraction like the ore, and the yacht's diamond dust. A clue to motive, but not the killer. Her eyes settled on Helena, who froze, her teacup clattering. "Lady Voss, you've been my guide, yet your threads weave deepest." Helena laughed, a brittle sound. "Jane, this is absurd. I'm your friend." But Miss Marple's gaze was unrelenting. "Your husband's fortunes crumbled, didn't they? Bad deals with Carol left you desperate. The insurance on his shares, the hidden diamonds. You saw a way out. You sent the anonymous note, pointing us to the yacht, to shift suspicion, the tampered brakes to silence my questions." Gasps rippled through the room. Helena's face drained of colour. "You've no proof." Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Your gloves, Helena, found in the villa's laundry, traces of diamond dust. Sophie's sketchbook, overlooked by all, caught you near the boathouse, not inside as you claimed. And the tulip petal? You plucked it from Brant's shop during our visit, planting it to implicate him. Helena's composure cracked, her hands trembling. It's lies, all of it. But Miss Marple pressed on, relentless as a tide. You dosed Carol's wine with digitalis, borrowed from Elise's cabinet under pretence of a headache. You knew his habits, late-night strolls by the water. You followed, argued over shares, and struck when Sophie's cry distracted him. Greed, Helena, like the tulip mania of old, blinded you to the cost. Inspector Van Dyke stood, his eyes narrowing. Is this true, Lady Voss? Helena's shoulders slumped, her voice a whisper. Carl ruined us, debts piled high, my husband broken. I begged him to sell his shares, but he laughed. The diamonds were my chance to start over. I didn't mean for it to go so far. The poison was to scare him, the blow an impulse. Tears streamed as she sank into a chair, the room's silence heavy. Miss Marple sighed, her face etched with pity. Human frailty, Inspector, weaves the tightest traps. Van Dyke signalled his constable, who gently escorted Helena away, her sobs echoing down the hall. Elise stared, stunned. Thorne's head bowed in shame. Sophie wept quietly. Brant slunk toward the door, his role diminished but not absolved. As the guests dispersed into the rainy night, Van Dyke tipped his hat to Miss Marple. You're a marvel, madam, like a heron fishing in murky waters. She smiled faintly. Merely an observer, Inspector. People are the same, whether in Amsterdam or my village. Their secrets spill in the smallest gestures. The villa's lights dimmed as they stepped onto the terrace. The Amstel River, a dark mirror under the bridge's glow. Miss Marple paused, gazing at the water. A pity, she murmured to Sophie, who lingered nearby. Helena's heart was as tangled as her plan. But you'll paint again, dear. Light follows shadow. Sophie nodded, clutching her sketchbook, a spark of resolve in her eyes. The rain ceased, leaving a cleansed city under a clearing sky. Miss Marple's work was nearly done, but one chapter remained, to tie the loose ends and bid farewell to Amsterdam's glittering, treacherous charm. Chapter 7. The Unravelling Thread. The rain had ceased, leaving Amsterdam's canals shimmering under a moon that hung low, like a silver coin tossed into the night. Miss Marple stood on the terrace of the Van der Linden villa, her shawl drawn tight against the damp chill, as the last of the memorial guests dispersed into the darkness. The confrontation had left the air heavy, Lady Helena's confession echoing like a sombre bell. Inspector Van Dyke's men had taken her away, her tearful admissions of greed and desperation still ringing in Miss Marple's ears. Yet, as the city's lights danced on the Amstel's surface, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle nearly solved, though loose ends remained to be tied, like the final stitches in a well-crafted scarf. Back at Helena's Herengracht house, now eerily silent without its mistress, Miss Marple sat with a cup of chamomile tea, its steam curling in the lamplight. The housekeeper, a stout Dutch woman named Liesbeth, hovered anxiously, offering a plate of Specula's biscuits. Such a shock, mevrouw, she murmured. Lady Voss, so refined, yet so ruthless. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes distant. Refinement masks many sins, Liesbeth. In my village, a churchwarden once stole from the poor box. Charming man, until the truth surfaced. She declined a biscuit, her mind sifting through the evening's revelations. Helena's motive rooted in financial ruin, the diamond smuggling scheme, the planted tulip petal. But what of the others? Were they truly innocent? Inspector Van Dyke arrived unannounced, his overcoat damp from the night air. He settled heavily into an armchair, his moustache drooping with fatigue. Miss Marple, You've spun a fine web tonight. Lady Voss confessed fully, poisoned Carol's wine with digitalis she pilfered from Elise's supply, then struck him during their argument by the boathouse. Sophie's cry startled her, she says, and the blow was panic, not plan. He produced a notebook, flipping to a page. We found her gloves in the villa's laundry, as you said. Diamond dust confirmed. And Sophie's sketch, tucked in her book, showed Helena's silhouette near the dock, ironclad. Miss Marple tilted her head, her knitting needles clicking softly on her lap. Ironclad, perhaps, but threads dangle, Inspector. Doctor, Thorne's role. Did he know of the poison? And Elise's forged letters, were they Helena's work alone? Van Dyck rubbed his temples. Helena claims she acted solo, forging the letters to frame Elise for jealousy. Thorne's clean, it seems, just a fool for love, prescribing too freely. We're releasing Brant. The ore was a plant, as you suspected. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Convenient but plausible. Helena was clever. Like a village spinster, I knew who hid theft behind a rival's name. Yet I'd like to see Sophie once more. Her heart carries guilt, though not for murder. The next morning, the city awoke to a festival winding down, its floats dismantled, petals littering the cobblestones like fallen confetti. Miss Marple and the inspector visited Sophie's studio, where the young artist was packing canvases, her movements slow with grief. The skylight cast a soft glow on her face, revealing shadows beneath her eyes. "Miss Marple," she said, voice trembling, "I keep seeing Uncle Carroll's face in the water. If I'd reached him sooner." Miss Marple patted her hand, her touch gentle as a mother's. "You tried to save him, dear. Guilt is a heavy brush, but it paints no truth. Your sketch helped us. Helena couldn't hide from your pencil." Sophie's lips quivered. "I saw her that night, lingering near the boathouse. I thought she was just restless. Aunt Elise and Dr. Thorne, I misjudged them." Miss Marple nodded. "Misjudgments are human. Elise's pride and Thorne's devotion were weaknesses Helena exploited, like a gardener pruning to mislead." She glanced at a canvas, a new work showing the Amstel at dusk, its waters calm yet deep. "You'll inherit Carroll's bulbs, I hear. Legitimate ones, I trust." Sophie managed to smile. "Yes, his hybrids. I'll sell them, fund my art. A fresh start." Van Dyck, standing by the door, coughed. "The smuggling's being traced. Diamonds hidden in bulb shipments, funneled through Brant's shop. He's not innocent, but not a murderer. We'll watch him." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Watch him closely, Inspector. Men like Brant are slippery, like eels in a village stream." They left Sophie to her packing, stepping into the Jordaan's bustling streets. Miss Marple suggested a final stop at Elise's villa, where they found her in the garden, pruning roses with a distracted air. Her morning silks were gone, replaced by a simple dress, her beauty softened by resignation. "Miss Marple," she said, setting down her shears, "you've undone us all. I thought Carroll's betrayal broke me, but those letters," Miss Marple's tone was kind but firm. "Forgeries, Mrs. van der Linden, meant to wound. Helena used your pain as a shield, but your marriage, were there other secrets?" Elise's gaze dropped. "Carroll was reckless. Business deals, debts. I spent to forget his distance. Dr. Thorne was a comfort, nothing more." Her voice cracked, revealing truth beneath the polish. Miss Marple nodded, recalling a St. Mary Mead widow whose spending masked loneliness. "Comfort can blind us, but it also heals. You'll find your way." As they departed, Van Dyck drove them to the station, where Miss Marple's train to the Hook of Holland awaited. The festival's last echoes faded, leaving Amsterdam's canals serene, their secrets laid bare. "You've a gift, Miss Marple," Van Dyck said, tipping his hat. "Like a painter, seeing what we miss." She smiled, her parasol tapping the platform. "Merely practice, Inspector. People are the same everywhere. Greed, love, fear. They weave their own traps." Boarding the train, she settled by a window, watching the city recede. The case was closed, yet her mind lingered on its lessons. Helena's desperation, Sophie's loyalty, Elise's pride, Thorne's folly. Each was a thread in the human tapestry, flawed yet vivid. As the train rattled toward the coast, she opened her detective novel, but her thoughts strayed to St. Mary Mead, where simpler mysteries awaited, perhaps a missing brooch or a quarrel over tea. Amsterdam's lights had dazzled, but its shadows had taught her most. Chapter 8. Reflections on the Canal. The train from Amsterdam to the Hook of Holland clattered through the Dutch countryside, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the whirl of thoughts in Miss Marple's mind. She sat by the window, her knitting folded neatly in her lap, watching the flat fields and windmills blur into a twilight haze. The Tulip Festival's vibrant chaos felt a world away, as did the dark currents of Karel van der Linden's murder, now resolved, yet leaving ripples in her memory, like pebbles dropped in St. Mary Mead's village pond. Back home, she had unpacked her modest suitcase, placing a single pressed tulip, red with white streaks, a keepsake from the villa's garden, into her album beside faded mementos of other mysteries. Over a pot of Earl Grey with her nephew Raymond, who had come to hear her tale, she recounted the Amsterdam affair, her voice as measured as the ticking of the parlour clock. "Really, Aunt Jane," Raymond said, leaning back in his chintz armchair, a grin playing on his lips, "you turn a holiday into a detective novel. Murder by a canal, diamonds in tulips. Sounds like one of your Agatha Christie yarns." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Life, my dear, writes better plots than novels. Amsterdam's lights dazzled, but its shadows were deeper. People are much the same, you know. Greed and love twist them, whether in a grand city or our little village." She sipped her tea, the steam curling like the mist over the Amstel that fateful night. The case had unfolded with the precision of a well-knitted pattern, each clue a stitch. The diamond dust on Helena's gloves, Sophie's damning sketch, the forged letters meant to mislead. Lady Helena Voss, her old friend, had been the spider in the web, her desperation born of debts and a husband's failing fortunes. She planned it carefully, Miss Marple explained, dosing Carol's wine with digitalis, stolen under pretense of a migraine. The blow by the boathouse was impulsive, sparked by his refusal to yield his shares. But she overreached, planting that tulip petal to implicate Brant, tampering with brakes to silence me. Like Mrs. Eldridge in the village, who hid her thefts behind a neighbour's name, Helena thought misdirection would save her. Raymond raised an eyebrow. And the others? That artist girl, the doctor, the wife. Miss Marple set down her cup, her fingers tracing the rim. Sophie was loyal, caught in grief's net. She saw more than she admitted, her sketches a silent witness. Dr. Thorne was a fool for Elise, his prescriptions too loose, but no murderer. Elise, poor, proud Elise, spent to mask her loneliness, believing Karel's betrayal until I showed her the letter's falsity. They were pawns in Helena's game, each with their frailties, like parishioners squabbling over the church fate. Outside, St. Mary Mead slumbered under a starry sky, its quiet lanes a stark contrast to Amsterdam's glittering canals. Miss Marple rose, crossing to the window where moonlight silvered her rose bushes. The city was a mirror, Raymond, reflecting human folly. Karl's empire, built on diamonds and rare bulbs, tempted fate. His smuggling, oh yes, he was complicit, I'm sure, drew predators. Peter Brandt skulked on the edges, profiting from stolen goods, but too cautious for murder. The police will watch him now, as they should a fox near a henhouse. Raymond lit his pipe, the smoke wreathing his face. And that inspector, Van Dyke, was it? Did he bow to your genius? Miss Marple chuckled softly. He called me a heron, fishing in murky waters. A kind man, thorough but hurried. He missed the subtleties, Sophie's hesitation, Helena's too perfect alibi. But he learned, as young Constable Polk did here when we caught the grocer's lad pilfering. She paused, her gaze distant. Detection is patience, Raymond. You watch, you listen, and the heart betrays itself, in a glance, a tremor, a petal out of place. She opened her album, the tulip's vivid hue, a stark reminder of the case. This flower, she said, was my first clue. Not from the villa's beds, but from Brandt's shop, placed to mislead. Helena didn't reckon on an old woman's memory for details. Raymond laughed. You're a terror, Aunt Jane. What next? A murder at the vicarage? She smiled, closing the album. Perhaps, but for now, I'll tend my garden and watch the village. Secrets bloom everywhere if you know where to look. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the canal lights in her memory. She thought of Sophie, now free to paint with Carol's legitimate bulb fortune, of Elise retreating to Paris to rebuild, of Thorne, chastened, his practice diminished. Amsterdam had been a stage, its players vivid but flawed, their motives as old as the tales in her detective novels. Cities dazzle, she told Raymond, but truth hides in quiet corners. Like our Miss Weatherby, who gossiped to hide her own loneliness, Helena's charm masked a breaking heart. Yet hearts mend, or they break others. Raymond stood, stretching. You make it sound so simple, Aunt Jane. But I wager you'll find another mystery before spring. She folded her hands, her smile enigmatic. Likely so. Human nature is a restless thing, always weaving new knots. As he kissed her cheek and left for his cottage, Miss Marple lingered by the fire, her mind drifting to the canals, their beauty, their secrets. She would write to Sophie, perhaps, encouraging her art, and to Inspector Van Dyke a polite note of thanks. But for now, St. Mary Mead's calm was enough, its own small dramas waiting in the wings. The clock struck 10, its chimes soft as a lullaby. Miss Marple rose, turning off the lamp, and climbed the stairs to her bedroom. The tulip album rested on her bureau, a silent testament to Amsterdam's lessons. As she slipped beneath the quilts, the village night enfolded her, its peace a balm after the city's tumult. Yet her mind, ever restless, sifted possibilities. Perhaps the vicar's new curate was too eager, or the postmistress's parcels too frequent. Tomorrow, she whispered to the dark, I'll watch again. For in the quiet of St. Mary Mead, as in Amsterdam's glittering maze, the truth always surfaced, patient as a seed beneath the soil.